Can Israel truly defeat Iran? After decades of shadow conflict, a full-scale war has erupted between the two countries. But while Israeli planes and missiles have destroyed key sites and eliminated senior figures, it's hard to see where all this will lead. Although Iran has undoubtedly experienced a heavy military defeat, can Israel secure an outright victory? And what exactly would this mean? Hello and welcome. My name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. When we think about armed conflict, we often view victory and defeat in relatively straightforward terms. One side achieves a decisive military win, forces the other to surrender, and then imposes the terms of peace. However, sometimes the situation is far less clear-cut. While one side may gain the upper hand militarily, it can't easily translate this into a comprehensive political victory. What looks to be a short-term win doesn't necessarily lead to a medium or long-term gain. All this is especially important in the case of the current conflict between Israel and Iran. While Israeli forces have undeniably emerged as the stronger side, looking ahead, it's hard to see what happens next. As things stand, Israel's strong military position may not lead to decisive political or strategic gains. It may be difficult to believe, but at one time Israel and Iran were on friendly terms. Although Iran joined other Muslim-majority states in opposing the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, it soon accepted its existence, and over the following decades, the two countries established a close working relationship. In addition to economic ties, they also cooperated closely on defence, intelligence and security matters. However, all this changed in 1979 when the Iranian monarchy was overthrown and a new Shia Muslim theocratic regime took power in Tehran. Strongly anti-Western and avowedly pro-Palestinian, it called for the destruction of Israel, and in the years that followed, it steadily built up close ties to other countries and groups opposed to the Jewish state. As well as aligning with Syria, it started funding organisations such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Palestinian-occupied territories. But the critical moment came at the turn of the millennium when reports emerged that Iran was developing a nuclear program. While it was widely believed that Israel already possessed nuclear weapons, although it's never been officially confirmed, the Iranian initiative was seen as a fundamental threat to international peace and security. As a result, having imposed sanctions on Iran, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council began efforts to try to stop Tehran's nuclear research. But while this eventually led to a landmark agreement, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, this was undermined in 2018 when Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the agreement, thus prompting Iran to restart its nuclear program. Meanwhile, having always insisted that it would never allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, Israel now vowed to do whatever was necessary to stop Tehran. In the period followed, the long-standing proxy war between the two countries steadily escalated, and this all came to a head on the 7th of October 2023 when Hamas launched an attack on Israel that left over 1,200 people dead and saw over 200 Israelis taken hostage. As Israel launched a massive operation against Hamas in Gaza, it also took on other key Iranian-backed targets, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon. As well as seriously injuring thousands of militants with booby-trapped mobile phones, it assassinated the group's leader and invaded southern Lebanon to destroy Hezbollah's missiles. To add to all this, Iran's regional influence took another significant blow when the 50-year Assad regime in Syria fell in December 2024, thus depriving Tehran of one of its key regional allies. More to the point, after years of indirect proxy conflict, the two countries now began to engage each other more directly, resulting in a series of tit-for-tat strikes over the course of 2024. But despite the growing confrontation between Israel and Iran, there were nevertheless hopes that the nuclear issue could still be resolved peacefully. These hopes were boosted when Donald Trump returned to office in January 2025. Setting his sights on a deal with Tehran, bilateral negotiations began just a few months later in the Gulf state of Oman. However, from the start, Israel remained sceptical. As far as it was concerned, Iran was merely trying to prolong the talks while it continued its research. And it was against this backdrop that the International Atomic Energy Agency, the international body that oversees the development of nuclear technology, announced on the 12th of June that the Iranian government had still not provided the necessary full and ambiguous cooperation it required. Just hours later, Israel responded by launching missiles and airstrikes against Iranian nuclear and military targets, as well as destroying large parts of Iran's air defences and bombing several sites linked to the nuclear programme. It also eliminated top-level Iranian military figures, including the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces and the Commander of the Revolutionary Guard, and killed a number of scientists linked to the nuclear programme. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please give it a like and perhaps subscribe to the channel for regular updates on international politics, conflict and security. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. So, where do things stand now? Firstly, while the military campaign is still ongoing, there's little doubt that Israel is the dominant side. While Iran has managed to attack a few sites in Israel, Israeli forces have inflicted far greater damage. More to the point, Israel now claims to control the airspace over the Iranian capital, Tehran. By any reasonable measure, this constitutes a resounding military victory. But crucially, this doesn't translate into a decisive political or strategic win. Although Iran has been significantly weakened, it still poses a threat. To begin with, on the key issue of Iran's nuclear programme, Israel has failed to deliver the decisive knockout blow. While there's evidence of heavy bombing at critical nuclear sites, analysts suggest that the key parts remain buried deep underground and remain operational. This means that Iran remains on course to develop a nuclear weapon. Secondly, unless Israel can keep up the pressure indefinitely, which may prove too complex and costly beyond the short term, it seems likely that Iran will begin to rearm, replenishing its stockpiles of missiles, aircraft and drones. To add to all this, even the picture with Iran's allies and proxies is a little less straightforward than it may seem. While Syria appears to have been lost following the fall of Assad, the country remains unstable. If the new regime were to collapse, Iran may well be able to regain a foothold. Meanwhile, over in Gaza, while Hamas has been hit hard and is openly calling for talks, it hasn't been eradicated. If anything, 18 months of brutal attacks will have radicalised many young Palestinians. Similarly, although Hezbollah has been dramatically weakened, it may well re-emerge given the ongoing political chaos that exists. In this sense, while the Iranian threat to Israel has been dramatically set back, it hasn't been eradicated. And it's for all these reasons that Israel now needs to find a way to translate its current military superiority into a longer-term political and strategic win. But just how can it do this? Of course, the most usual and obvious way to do this in such situations would be to invade and occupy the country in question. But in this case, this is absolutely impossible. Iran is a vast country with a population of around 90 million people. As much as many ordinary Iranians may hate the current regime, Israeli forces wouldn't be welcomed. Moreover, no one else will step in to do it either. While the United States may dislike the Iranian regime, bitter experience in Afghanistan and Iraq has shown that occupations are complex, costly, and most usually wildly unsuccessful. So, what else could Israel do? At this stage, there appears to be four broad options. The trouble is that none of them seem particularly likely to succeed, at least for now. First, it could concentrate on decisively dismantling Iran's nuclear programme by continuing its military operations. However, given that the sites remain intact, it appears that Israel lacks the powerful bombs necessary to do this. In this sense, it would need to bring the United States on board. However, for now, Washington seems reluctant to attack Iran. This means that as soon as Israeli attacks stop, Iran's work is likely to start again in earnest. Once more, this is likely to require a lengthy Israeli military campaign. Secondly, Israel could now accept that the best option is renewed US or internationally led negotiations. The trouble is that after Israel's attack, Iran now seems less inclined to talk. Indeed, if anything, it seems more likely that it's preparing to push ahead with its nuclear program. But even if talks did end Iran's nuclear program, it will still see an Iranian regime left in power that, in one way or another, poses a threat to Israel. Thirdly, but even less likely at this stage, Israel could try to engage Iran in formal peace talks. As in other cases, this would see Tehran recognise Israel, end its nuclear program, and agree to desist from any further direct or indirect attacks on the country. However, as weak as Iran now seems, this appears unlikely. The entire Iranian regime has been built on a profound hatred for Israel. To capitulate would almost certainly be a step too far. The one thing that might make it possible is an Israeli agreement to establish a Palestinian state. But Israel refuses to do this. Likewise, any Iranian demand that Israel give up its own nuclear weapons would be unacceptable to Israeli decision makers. And this leaves the final option, regime change. In fact, this appears to be the preferred option for Israeli policymakers. For example, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already recorded messages reaching out to the Iranian population to insist that Israel's true enemy is the theocratic regime at the top, not the ordinary people below. However, while regime change may not be entirely beyond the realms of possibility, it's certainly not easy. Nor is it something that Israel can control. More to the point, Israel can't be sure that any new government will be friendlier, although it may be easier to persuade it to abandon the nuclear program. And it's for all these reasons that it's so difficult to see how Israel's strong military position can now be translated into a decisive political and strategic victory. After decades of confrontation, Israel and Iran have finally come to blows, and yet, having gained a decisive military position, Israel is left with the complex question of what to do next. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.